For nearly 25 years, I've attended, spoken at, listened to, and contributed to untold numbers of threads and themes in the wealth technology space. Yet to me, something still is missing. It's the human stories and perspectives of wealth management. How does all this wealth technology impact investors and those that support them? I'm Doug Fritz, CEO and founder of F2 Strategy, and host to our new Get Vocal series, On the Road with the Man in the Van. And I'm determined to look at technology of wealth in a whole new way, one that I hope connects all of us with the more human side of what we do. So buckle up and join me as the humans of wealth technology are about to get vocal. Hey everybody, welcome to our third installment of the Man in the Van Vocal Voice of Client Advisor Leader series hosted by F2 Strategy. I'm Doug Fritz, president of F2 Strategy, and I have the distinct pleasure today to be joined by Toussaint Bailey, who is the president of Enso Wealth based in Petaluma, California, a very fast growing, unique wealth management firm, a friend of mine and someone I've been looking forward to speaking to in this session since we had the ideas about the session. So Toussaint, welcome to the Man in the Van.
Thanks for having me. It's pretty
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, you and I talk frequently on a number of different topics, and you're an emergingly well-known name in the wealth management industry. So people have heard of you, have seen you, have sort of seen you in different aspects. But I want just from your own voice, give me a little bit of your background. Like, how did you get here? Not, I mean, in the van or in your office, but here in running a fast-growing wealth management firm. What's the story behind that?
So think of the most non-linear, jagged, broken, hopping path that you can imagine, and like there.
Yeah.
I prior to this was a lawyer for over a decade. Not in corporate law, not in finance. I was doing litigation, primarily for government agencies, few healthcare agencies, and had studied finance in undergrad and always felt comfortable with numbers, had studied kind of community development and business and things in law school, but just had gotten away from that. And my friend of 20 plus years, my now brother-in-law, was leaving a large broker dealer to start his own firm back in 2014. And he first called the only lawyer he knew to ask, what's going to happen? Am I going to get sued? And I kind of talked him off a ledge there. But then we started talking about like kind of what that would be. And we were talking about fulfillment back then and doing something different. And years went by. I got deeper into my law firm, partnership and all of that. And he was getting deeper into his entrepreneurial journey. I sort of had one eye over there because I liked what the fruits of his success looked like relative to mine, but wasn't paying too much attention until 2016. He started thinking about gathering people. This is Jim Dakota. He started thinking about gathering people and called me in that mode again, sort of as a sounding board, talking about kind of structuring things. And I, at that time, was kind of new to my part. I was like 3 years into partnership at my law firm, and I had all these ideas that nobody wanted to hear as a young partner. Oh, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. And so I like all of those ideas about how to bring people together in a partnership, how to incentivize people, what firm culture could be like. I started spewing to him. And he was eating that stuff up. I'm like, oh God! I mean, this guy wants to hear all the things that my
want to hear ideas? I got ideas.
Yeah, I can keep going. And so that became like just like a series of conversations. And later in 2016, he started talking about just sort of his inability to find the kind of support that I was giving, and so. I started to, after our conversations, I started to study the industry, and specifically, I started to study what landing places were available for financial advisors. So I started nerding out on M&A. I started looking at platforms. I started looking at RA aggregators. I started looking at broker dealers and just kind of understanding where advisors could move, what that looked like. And I felt like I found this little white space. And I didn't know enough to know what I didn't know. And so we started talking about that white space. I started writing about the culture that would have to be built in order to make the kind of firm that I imagined successful. That ended up being like this 15-page document with all these footnotes and things that we now call the manifesto at Enso. And so fast forward to 2017, I presented that to some of the partners who had expressed interest in coming on and even committed to coming on, and like expecting to sort of blow minds, like expecting, because I hadn't seen anything like this. But to my surprise, like it was almost like they were waiting to hear what I was sharing about. I talked about enlightened self-interest and the culture of abundance that would need to be built in order to have as much freedom as we have in our structure. Yeah. Talked about, bigger pieces or smaller pieces of a bigger pie and all these things. And another room where they were eating up the stuff that is often like cockamamie ideas in more traditional settings. And so that resonated, that landed, that was just a pet project. A couple months later, this is June of 2017, I was headed into my law firm, and they were like four of the now advisors at Enso were going away for a retreat. They called me. They said, we're here for our first annual summer retreat. There's 4 of us, and we're wondering why you're not here with us. So I went up there. We talked about strategy. We talked about structure. We talked about incentives. And by the end of that, they're like, we don't know how. We want you to join us. So I came on as kind of a chief strategy officer, and I think 6 months later, I was CEO. Like, completely unqualified to be CEO. Other than I shouldn't say that.
You shouldn't, because
my skills, my skills in the way I'd led, because I'd led at my law firm and I'd managed people and all of that. I never applied it in this context, and so it was very out of the box of them to think about having someone with my background come in. But I think it's been a good marriage.
So I think your entrepreneurial core is something you probably always had. I think that your comment about the differentiation of entrepreneurial, willing to take risks, that's probably more an Enso characteristic that I've seen just sort of being around you guys for the last year, than an industry characteristic. And I think I would also attribute a lot of Enso's success to that, the culture of willing to take risks, willing to move things forward if it makes sense to do it. And you definitely found the right place, man, for your personality and the personality of the firm. Going back even farther, like hit on that entrepreneurial drive for a second. Like, where does that come from in you? Is that something that you've always had from childhood? Is that something that sort of you've sort of grown into? Like, how did you kind of become Toussaint? Like, how did that? Because your energy, your enthusiasm, your intelligence, your drive, your ability to bring people into ideas in a safe space and have honest, open, sometimes difficult conversations is not a normal human characteristic, man. Like, that's a different skill set. Where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, so different places. I think I credit all the kind of guidance I got along the way, but the person who comes to mind more than any is my mom. She was not an entrepreneur. She ran a social services organization, most recently, before her passing, homeless support services organization. Before that, she worked in the drug courts, helping moms get their kids back. Before that, there was like AIDS outreach that she did. So she was a servant, but she was also a free person, right? Like, so her ideas were certainly her own. We giggled at how much she kind of marched to the beat of her own drum. And so I think that creator piece of entrepreneurialism really kind of comes from the sense of freedom that she just walked around with naturally. In terms of connection, I probably go back to both of my parents. Like, I've never seen anyone that either of them were uncomfortable dealing with, or couldn't find compassion for, couldn't have a conversation with. My dad has studied, macroeconomics at the highest level, and he himself has dealt with homelessness, and both of them raised in northern Louisiana and migrated. My mom to Watts, my dad to South Central Los Angeles, and then they went on, kind of first college educated people in their families. They met at UCLA, so both of them have seen different worlds, and both of them kind of navigated those worlds in these very unique ways. Like neither of them should have ended up where they were in terms of success, and neither of them are kind of have the characteristics of people who could navigate the worlds that they could navigate. And so I haven't built any of the capacities that you've talked about, and it's even hard for me to kind of trace those back, because it's just the way I've been. And if I had to attribute it to something, I would attribute it to that. I've always been comfortable communicating, and I've always been comfortable thinking about concepts and connecting concepts. Like I've always seen connections and wanted to apply one concept to something that seemed completely out of context. So going from being like a lawyer, a government lawyer, to being in wealth management and finding where the skills apply, and like that pattern has repeated itself repeatedly in my life.
There's a freedom that I think a lot of people don't have the opportunity to get, or aren't instilled in them, or aren't provided with the flexibility to have those type of free thinking that they're brought up in, especially as a parent. Like you're conscious of allowing your children to form their own space and form their own version of themselves. And it sounds like you had two amazing parents that either through watching and witnessing them have that level of freedom and achieve that level of freedom, or possibly also like instilling or giving that kind of freedom into you that I'm super glad you had it, because you're an amazing leader, an amazing just change agent in the industry. So
well I appreciate that. I will say they instilled the value, but like the execution of it is not without effort. Like, so I have a coach, and I can think of a conversation with him where I talked to him about like not fitting in being exhausting, right? Like, so like at some point, am I just going to drop all the way into like check all the boxes for one of these roles? And he's like, not, probably not. that doesn't seem to be your journey. And so there is effort, right? Like, I was thinking about like the idea of perfectionism earlier, or journaling about the idea of perfectionism earlier this week, and really kind of trying to unpack what makes us go toward perfectionism. I think it's a related idea to kind of want to perfectly execute on a particular role. I was thinking perfectionism is really a misnomer. The word is too attractive for what it is. Really, I think what we're seeking, or what I seek when perfectionism sets in, is this uncriticizability, which is not a word, but it's like you're trying to be exempt.
Bulletproof.
Yeah, you're trying to be bulletproof, and perfectionism like connotes like going toward these positive, like this perfect, beautiful thing. But really, you're just trying to avoid anything negative being said about or thought about what you're doing. And like, for me, like battling that uncriticizability is not without cost, but I value the freedom on the other side of that.
Wow, I love that. That's huge. Thank you for sharing. Like we've had a lot of these conversations, and I think it's great to get it out in the open, but like it's amazing to see all that cadence of work and influence end up with the person you are, like making significant changes in the industry right now. I love that. To the point on making changes and being impactful, like when we've talked about this in the past too, like you have an energy, you get up and you do this, I think as a Black man, you do this against the level of viscosity that is very rare in our industry, because you've gotten to this point through an unbelievable amount of BS that you've had to deal with to get to this spot. And yet every morning you wake up and you're always positive, you're always driving things forward. And maybe it's just on the surface, but you certainly express that level of energy. Where does that come from? Like when you get up in the morning and you're getting ready to come back into this world and continue to make these changes, like what gets you up in the morning? What's that motivating factor that gets you to the spot you are now?
Yeah. So I think the I'll give you the process, and then I'll give you the thing that it is, that like the content of what that is now. But so the process for me has been being intentional about managing my energy and going toward that which gives me energy, and not apologizing for going away from what doesn't give me energy. And so it was at the level of success is often a cheap word, but at the level of success that I had as a lawyer, which I enjoyed, right? I enjoyed that time. I think it was peculiar to some people and kind of unsettling to some people in my life that I was making this decision to take what was essentially a step back, right? We didn't know what Enso was going to be. And so that was done though, out of pursuit of what gave me energy. Like, so Enso was talking about fulfillment. I was lit on fire by this kind of entrepreneurial mindset that you talked about. Like there was this mindset of abundance and light and stuff that felt good. And I didn't need to have a thorough explanation on the other side to know that, like, okay, this is right. So allowing my energy to point me there. I've done that same thing kind of in micro doses, in daily decisions or in weekly decisions. And I continue to do that thing now. And so what gives me energy now and what I know you've seen me go toward is uplifting. Like, so finding ways. So like it was fulfillment for a long time, finding ways to teach people and give people fulfillment. That continues to be the core value of what Enso's about, translating wealth into fulfillment. My personal kind of version of fulfillment now, and my personal version of what gives me energy, I jump out of bed thinking about uplifting. Like, so that word has two sides when I say it. One is like the work of uplifting. So uplifting others, the actual result of creating uplifted conditions. But to me, it's also the second piece of that is the feeling, uplifting feelings. And so thinking about how to do those two things simultaneously and bringing those things together. I spend a lot of time in the mindfulness and emotional intelligence space and in those conversations. And I think those are more about this internal experience. And I've begun to spend most of my waking hours in the impact space. And I think those are about this kind of external measurable uplifting. And so like thinking about bringing those things together and doing those simultaneously or doing one or the other is really kind of how I jump out of bed. And fortunately, it's how I've organized most of my days to be able to spend my time like that.
Love it. Do you have, so if someone's watching this or listening to this and they could say, oh my gosh, I wonder what Toussaint has read or participated in to get there. Like, do you have a name of a book or a process that you've used or some sort of methodology that someone listening to this can say, like, I want to go do what Toussaint, like I want to know what that is. Do you have a reference for folks that are watching?
Yeah, I became an accidental student of mindfulness and I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. And I did that through a book called Search Inside Yourself. So that's like, I have a laundry list of books. So I would say mindfulness. So Search Inside Yourself is a program that you can kind of go through, and it really is tailored to like the corporate, no nonsense, data-driven person, and it's a nice invitation into mindfulness-based emotional intelligence or mindfulness-based leadership. So that was amazing. I continue to be connected to that organization. I'm serve on their advisory board, unpaid, and just think the world of them and all the teachers that they deploy. So there, I would say Brene Brown's work has been tremendous in terms of that uncriticizability hurdle or the perfectionism hurdle. I think I first watched Brene Brown has her famous kind of Power of Vulnerability TED Talk. That's kind of the bite-sized invitation. And then she has a longer Power of Vulnerability workshop that somehow recorded, and it turned into a book called Daring Greatly. Those vulnerability capacities that she teaches have been those have changed me. Those have been transformative. I would say that, like, so the combination of mindfulness and vulnerability have probably been the most freeing things. And then I've taken those and applied those to all sorts of different contexts. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you. That's huge. I think people I always listen to, and someone will talk about their thing, and I never have the opportunity when I watch someone else's podcast or video, I never get a chance to ask the question of like, where did you go to, where did that person go? What did they read? So I can go do that myself. Um, like skipping forward a little bit, that right now, your success, right? Your success, especially moving industries and being very successful in one and seemingly overnight. Clearly, there's a lot of work involved in like what you've done in the last 3 years, 4 years. But what does success feel like to you right now? Like, how do you, when you think about where you are in your life right now, and then what has that changed at all through your life? Has the concept of success changed as you've gone through multiple careers in multiple industries, and kind of where is that landing now? That concept of success for you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's changed dramatically. I think I don't think the success that resonates internally has changed. I think my awareness of that has changed. And so right now, to me, success is just kind of living in congruence with my values. Like, so the opportunity to live out my values and then to amplify what I think those values create. So uplifting being kind of the umbrella. But to me, success is, and you've heard me talk about the waterfall at Enso before. And so success is that. So the waterfall is a set of values that I think leads to fulfillment, at least as I understand it, and as we have kind of embraced in our organization. So success means the extent to which I am engaging in loving and trusting relationships, like the kind of aggregate love and trust that I'm getting and giving from people is probably the primary measure of success. Self-actualization. And so the amount of time I spend, the depth of my uplifting myself and kind of mastering myself, becoming aware of kind of what's going on in there. To me, that's success. And there's all sorts of external circumstances and goals that I can set to track those things. But at bottom, like it's that. So I could say like next year, we want to be a $10 billion firm. But the journey of who I have to become and the relationships that I have to create along the way are really what I ultimately think of as success. And then from there, so I think about collective impact and co-creation. So success is, and that's that external uplifting. Like what is the impact that not only I'm having, but kind of like that I'm able to encourage others to come along with me on. And then personal gain. So like I measure my success financially. I believe that we show how much we value things in financial terms. And so that is fourth. So in that order, right? Loving and trusting relationships, self-actualization, collective impact and co-creation, and then personal gain are how I measure it. And all of that for me, like manifests itself in uplifting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody else that has that level of articulation about success and have thought about it in that context. And then been able to actually build a tremendously successful organization around that vision of success. There's I'm sure you know, but like there aren't a lot of people in this world that have been able to take their ideals and their beliefs and constructed a company with people that they love and trust around them and been able to be successful in that way. It's a huge standout. I never tire of hearing about kind of how you guys have come up with this idea and how it's grown and continues to grow based on those core foundations. It's amazing.
I appreciate that. No, I read that every morning. Every morning I read, I trust the process. Fulfillment is a process that begins with loving and trusting relationships, self-actualization, co-creation, personal gain. So like that process is burned in my head. And the idea that fulfillment is a process, not a destination, is burned in.
Yeah, I love that. Shifting gears a little bit more, I think, we talk a lot, you and I talk a lot about the future of wealth management, and you are absolutely at the forefront of a number of different areas of creating that future. Can you just talk about that? Where do you see wealth management going? I mean, clearly you've built an amazing firm that has a very differentiated feel and value proposition, but it's not done. You're continuing to innovate a lot. Talk about that. Like where does this head? And how does, and you can also like, how is Enso, leading that way?
Yeah. Macro, I think it's getting better. It has to, because I think people are getting more sophisticated. So we had this information age where Having access to information was an advantage. And then like we hit this tipping point where everyone had information, and then sorting that information or sorting that data, knowing how to analyze that became the advantage. Now I think even that wisdom is becoming distributed. And so that's true of consumers. That's true of advisors. That's true of the general population. I think the awareness of what creates value and what doesn't is being elevated at all levels of sophistication for people. And so I think the industry is feeling the pressure of that. I think we talk about fee compression, but I think it's really pressure to expand value, right? Like, I think of it as value expansion. It's the Amazon, Netflix effect. Like, those people are over delivering on value and thinking about how to do it at the next level on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. So we got 2-day shipping. How can we get down to 1-day shipping? How can we get down to hourly shipping? That's becoming.
We'll ship it before you even think about it, right? Like,
yeah,
I got a belt in the mail. I needed a belt. That's amazing.
Yeah. How can we anticipate at that level? But that's affecting the general population and the way the general population thinks about value. And so we're starting to see that show up. I'm excited. I think there's verticals where people are having to get better. I think technology is one of them, right? So we've seen technology be forced to get better. I think client outcomes and goals are one of them. And I think that's kind of where we make our hay at Enso is really helping people think deeply about what's most fulfilling. Like, what are you really seeking with your money? How can we help you get to that rather than even the goal that you kind of come in with? So there's others, right? Like, I think alpha, people are wanting to see that depth of service. And so I think ultimate impact is a huge one, and how well impact is delivered to investors who have an appetite for impact, which I think eventually will be all of them. And so I think, like, macro answer to your question, I think the future of the industry is delivering more value at least the same cost, if not less. For me, like that fulfillment piece is important at Enso. I think we have a role to play in there. I think we have a unique voice in kind of helping bring firms and clients along and how to ingrained fulfillment in their process. Like, that's what people want from there. The people aren't coming seeking money. People are coming seeking fulfillment through money. And so thinking about how to get ahead of that is something that we do well. For me, impact and combining concepts, like, how do you make impact more fulfilling? And that's what I alluded to early in the conversation about this internal piece of return. And you hear it talked about as values alignment, mass personalization, but how do you really deliver to people the internal experience that they're really seeking when they articulate that external desire? And so I think we'll have to answer that question in impact, just like we're having to answer it everywhere else.
Yeah. Let's go into impact and Enso is built on this concept of fulfillment, not valuation, right? So wealth for something, wealth for fulfillment, and translation of success into fulfillment and money into fulfillment. When you think about that client experience and where this is going, sort of future setting right now, and it's as an industry, but maybe more to the point at Enso, as you're on this journey and you're starting to innovate that process and innovate the experience and innovate the feel of being an Enso client for those that do want to have a deeper impact. Where does that go? Where is it heading in the next 2 years in terms of the types of experiences and information and insights that the Enso client's going to be able to achieve, and kind of how do you think that evolution is going to be received by your clients?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that, because the Enso part has more to do with fulfillment, and the impact part is my own is a separate but related project that will certainly be driven by and in service of Enso clients. So the fulfillment part, I think, is just a version of that value creation, of that kind of pushing value. And when I think of adding value in really innovative and disruptive ways, I think of kind of overstepping our bounds. And so you feel that from Amazon, you felt that from Netflix when they went from having the DVDs to going digital, and we kind of didn't know how to feel about it, but they were pushing us to that experience because they knew it was more valuable. So thinking about how to introduce conversations that your clients don't really know they want. And so that comes from having a better kind of map of client lives. That comes from guiding conversations with questions that people aren't expecting necessarily from their financial advisor. That comes from kind of knowing them at that depth. So that's the fulfillment piece. I think the impact piece has to do with, I think over the next couple of years at Enso and beyond, people are going to demand to be closer to and more and have more personalization of their impact. And we're seeing some of that with what's happening in the direct indexing space. So that's part. I think that personalization is part of it, and I think we'll continue to see that. I think part of it. Just personalization is not enough. I think communicating that in ways that are personal to the client, like that personally are satisfying, so that is potentially compromising some of this like technical language that those who are first to sustainable investing are kind of steeped in and kind of tied to, right? That there's like this translation piece that is an exercise in giving that requires communicating differently. So I think we'll continue to see that. I think the trend will be there. That's that personalization piece. But I think there's also a proximity to impact. I think people are going to continue to demand to feel their impact more. And I think that's going to come from storytelling. I think that's going to come from innovative reporting that does more with data, that does more with or entrepreneurial stories that just does more. And so I think the trend is going to go that way: personalization, proximity to impact, and Enso's clients will benefit from that as well as others.
Yeah. We've talked about impact a ton. You and I have even off of this podcast, the video cast, but and this isn't something we've ever talked about really, and maybe I've never talked to anybody about this before. But as we're talking about it now, I'll just risk asking the question with you: is that with social media back in 20 years ago, and we started maybe not 20 years, 15 years ago now, we started to see social media, the enticement, or at least some of the sublines around social connectivity was it was going to make us kinder, nicer, more connected people. Like what kind of a world could be negative if people just felt closer to each other, even if you didn't know each other? And what ended up happening, I'm sure the Facebook folks would jump up and down and disagree with me here, but what ended up happening was we found tribes, and those tribes led to dark places. And those dark places are just getting worse. Like that, I don't see it necessarily getting better. People are easier to find someone with a correlated and terrible idea and value system now than ever before. And that's not a social commentary. It's just an observation. With impact investing, traditionally the byline is a better world, a greener world, a more just world, a more diverse world, a world that values the good and the just and the right. But that's an objective viewpoint that someone with very negative ideas and very negative, I would perceive as negative views in the world, could view impact as like, great, now I'm going to use this to further my own, personal views and things. What keeps impact investing? Does anything keep impact investing from following maybe some of the negative threads of what happened in social media? Do you have any thought on that?
Yeah. So I'm bullish on human goodness. So I think social media is going to get better. I think we are headed in the right direction. I think we're talking shortly after the conviction of George Floyd's murder. That is like saying that's not enough is just doesn't begin to explain like how minuscule that is in terms of progress. But I'm not in the business. I'm not into minimizing victories. That is progress. Let's pre 2020. I don't think that verdict comes out like that. So I think like if you hold up the kinds of values that you're talking about that we've seen espoused on social media and we see now espoused in the broader media, and you have a fair fight against the kinds of values that created this impact investing, I think the latter wins every time. And I think we're at a tipping point where the voice of people who desire real and true impact that moves the world forward is too loud to be overtaken by those dark forces of social media. I don't see that happening. I think I talked a little bit earlier about the kind of increasing levels of sophistication in people generally. I think that's also true of impact and understanding of sustainability. Like I love the generations that are coming up behind us. Like I'm like so grateful for them. Like I have a toe in that millennial. I think I'm just before the millennial generation, but like I love millennials. I love Gen Zers. I'm grateful for them because they're pushing us in the right direction. They're my hope that doesn't happen.
Mine too. Yeah, I think I share that as well. It's just one of those, I see so much happening right now in our society, and I sure as hell hope that, we don't have an impact fund that is just full of, anyway.
Yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I do think we have, so those of us who have these platforms do have to continue to make sure we are inviting new people who have the desire to make the right kind of impact into impact. Like it can't be something that we huddle our arms, or we kind of put our arms around and keep as the exclusive domain of people who have all the right words or use all the right phrases or have all the depth of understanding. I think like we want impact to be distributed, right? And we want people engaging in impact to be broader, the kind of impact that you're talking about. So I do think in order for this kind of motion that's happening right now to be sustained, we have to continue to invite new voices into impact and translate for them, like translate into terms that people understand and resonate with them.
Yeah, I believe democratizing it and making it more approachable so that it's not this lofty thing. It's no, I have values and I can see my values in my portfolio.
Yeah, that's and we can move on from this, but like I think if the keepers of sustainable investing and impact and the people who have the truest motives for that do that translation first, you kind of get out ahead of the person who comes and talks in lay terms and has nothing underneath in terms of delivering actual impact. And so I think we would be smart to be the first to translate impact for the broad public.
I totally agree. So we're sitting here in 2021. Since 2017, you've been at Enso. Your second major career, a champion for impact, a champion for social justice. You're using your authenticity and your voice and people's trust and your position for a number of very, very good reasons. And you're out there, you're vulnerable, and you're leading, and you're a voice. And I love seeing you talk. I love having people, hear your voice, and it's not enough by any stretch. Can you share with me what's the future for you insofar as like what is the next 10, 20, 30 years look like for Toussaint, and what can we that are behind you and applauding as you're moving forward, like what can we expect to continue to applaud?
Yeah. So internally, it's continuing to be courageous about moving away from the desire for uncriticizability. So doing things that and having a voice that doesn't check all the boxes, and kind of pushing myself toward that because I believe in that. The way that manifests itself right now, and I think over a long period of time, is calling people into work, conversations, impact that uplifts others. And so I think for me, what I've learned, I surprised I have a kind of a framework that I think about like how we figure out our
shocked
how we figure out our impact,
It's
right?
amazing.
And how like a healthy and sustainable way to go about thinking about how to get into that frame. And so for me, it's about first kind of feeling into the gap, right? So it's like it's a lot of this. I borrow a lot. Again, I borrow concepts. So I borrow a lot from the grieving space, right? So the author David Kessler like talks so articulately. He's one of the co-authors of the 5 stages of grief. He talks really articulately about this 6th stage that he discovered after he lost his son, finding meaning. And so I think like the 5th stage is acceptance. And so getting to this place where we feel into what's missing, and then going to a place where we start to find meaning. And I think a lot of that's done by like imagining what we want to see, like kind of moving toward a positive vision, imagining what thriving looks like in any context, and then kind of thinking about our superpowers, and then thinking about how to deploy those in very bite-sized ways. So micro acts of courage, like you heard me talk about the 1%, these 1% acts. So to me, like helping people understand impact in that fashion, like inviting people into impact in a way that uplifts. And I'm like, we're on a financial services podcast, so every time I say impact, I think it might sound like impact investing, but I just mean amplifying their impact. Right. And so to me, going toward that, doing that myself, but pulling people into that, helping people have an uplifting internal experience while uplifting others, is something that excites me to do. It excites me to talk about. And so at least as I see it now, for the foreseeable future, I'll be spending time on that. Love it.
I'm so appreciative. And thank you so much for just being Toussaint, like being out there, being you. It is it's an absolute honor to be able to know you and to be able to participate in some of these thoughts with you. And thank you for sharing in this venue, and just for continuing to share and for the work that you do. And you know, I personally look forward to being as helpful in whatever way possible to that outcome, because I'm 100% behind everything you do. So I just want to thank you very personally. It's just,
thank you. That feeling's mutual. Like, so I hope you know that by now, but yeah, no, I'm a fan.
Right. Well, to those that pay attention and got on the call and are watching this at home or the podcast, thank you, Toussaint, again, from Enso. Hopefully you guys found this as valuable as I did. This was very much time well spent, and hope folks watching and think so as well. And I really appreciate you, Toussaint. Have a great, wonderful weekend.
I appreciate you making the space and amplifying my voice, Doug. Thanks.